And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. And I know you might be asking, hey, Joe, where's the signature? Where's the intro? Allow me to explain. For some reason, this website that we use every now and then has technical issues when I try to play the rolls out. And basically freezes my screen, makes it kind of impossible for me to really see what's going on. And I don't know when you could see me or not. So to avoid that issue today, we're just going a pure, uncut, simple live show. And joining me today is Cover One's Uber Hansen, host of the Cover One Roundup, co-host of the Cover One Roundup, because he also does it with David Fox. How you doing, man? Welcome.
Yeah, I'm good. It's a little bit disconcerting that we have to wait still well over 48 hours for the Bills game. Like leading up to games is always anxiety inducing for me, and now I have to wait till Monday night for this one. Just frustrating.
Yes, I don't like the gap, but I do think that it gives us some time as a fan base, as creators, as a network to kind of just go over the nuances of this team, to really explore the hows, the whys, everything that we can to kind of get to the bottom of what's plaguing the Bills, which is really the focus of today's discourse, with a little Bills Broncos preview towards the end. But I see we got some people joining us in the chat. RJ Melville says, "What's up, everyone? Really wish this team could get their collective poop emoji together." I agree, RJ. And then what is this one right here from Whopper, which says,
yeah, let me address this. One, this is absolutely not true. I never suggested we cut Khalil Shakir. I saw a path for Deontay Hardy and Justin Shorter, who's on IR, to get some playing time over Shakir. I'll say I'm very happy with Shakir's play. I'm happy I was wrong about him being more just a depth role. But just to be clear, I never once suggested cutting Khalil Shakir from the Bills.
Yeah, I don't recall that take either, but I'm glad we didn't, because he's lending himself to be a very useful part of how this Bills offense functions, especially in kind of the style that they're functioning. And I'm excited to see what he does for the future. All right, let's be nice in the chat today. I see you guys getting feisty. That's kind of the state of the fan base and the state of the Bills right now, man. As I said before, I really just want to keep today's episode centered on this conversation of really like our biggest issues with the Bills, where they are right now, trying to really just make this about perspective of the team and how we kind of progress forward. And really over the past month has just been really turbulent. It's been a series of flashes and a series of pure negatives from this team that has really underwhelmed. So before we get into kind of the crux of our discourse, I just want to ask you, your overall feelings about this team, like the direction, really just your general feelings about their future and kind of what you hope to see from them going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I know from my experience on Twitter the past week or two, people don't like the optimism that I have for the Bills at this point in time. I'll say the optimism is slowly waning. I am a forever optimist with this team, but with the way that they've played in recent, it's a little bit harder for me to be optimistic. That being said, just to quickly go over the Bengals game, I went into that game fully expecting the Bengals to win that game. I actually picked the Bengals to win that game, and I left that game thinking, actually, the Bills didn't look all that bad in that game, so left it thinking maybe there's a little bit like more meat on the bone down the line. As far as the Bills go, they got to beat the Broncos, and then they got to beat the Jets. Like, they have to start stacking wins. And at this point in time, the one thing that I'm going to harp on constantly is it's got to be the offense that does it. Like, Sean McDermott is basically running out a practice squad defense to play starting defenses like the Bengals. Like, in the future, we have to play Jalen Hurts and that Eagles offense. So at this point in time, it's on Josh. Like, Josh and the offense have to win football games for the Bills. And if they can't, then what is an optimistic person in myself, it will quickly turn pessimistic. And that could start as early as Monday night if the Bills can't get away with that game with a W.
Yeah, this is a vital week for the Buffalo Bills this year. You're 5-4. You are looking at the potential for your playoff odds to drop down to 41% if you lose this game. And it's also, again, a home primetime matchup against an AFC team that, frankly, while they've been playing better, are 3-5, and there's no excuse. And I think the issue is not the issue, but really kind of how our mindsets have changed about the Buffalo Bills is going into the year, we chalk that up as, okay, they got Sean Payton, but they had a terrible year. They have to prove that they're a team that they can, they can actually be competitive. And then they start the year slow. They're resurging a little bit. But frankly, the way the Bills are constructed and how they should perform, you should see this team get an easy win. But that's not the case right now. Every game that they play is not easy. And it's the NFL. Week to week, it's hard. Aaron Quinn always says it's hard to win games in this league. It's hard to be a top team in this league. But at this point, we shouldn't have to be in this position of kind of woe, gloom, dread for a 3-5 matchup, but that's exactly what's happening. And, today on this episode, we're going to talk about our three biggest, I guess if you want to call it catalysts for the Bills' really underwhelming performance, the three biggest issues. And before we get to that, I just want to ask you, Uber, do you feel that this is a hole that this team has essentially dug themselves in and they can't climb out of because it's 5-4. You had one of the easiest parts of the schedule, and it's only going to get significantly harder from here on out.
Yeah. No, I think they can dig themselves out. And again, this is optimistic Uber Hansen talking, so take this with a grain of salt. But at the same time, they're only half a game out of first in the AFC East. That's the thing that I'm holding on to tightest. I don't think the number one seed's really on the table at all anymore. And I don't think this team is capable of making a run to get that number one seed. I think they're capable of winning the AFC East because I don't think the Dolphins are as good as everyone thinks they are after watching them the past few weeks and every time they play somebody that's in their quote unquote weight class. So for me, I look at that as long as the Bills can stay within in swinging distance of the Dolphins, I'm really not going to drop off this optimism. So for instance, as long as they win this week, we're good. If next week they lose, but also the Dolphins lose, as long as they keep maintaining pace right there, so for the final week of the season, they have a shot to win that division. I'm going to believe they can because I've seen it in the past. I trust Josh Allen against that team. I trust him more than I trust Tua. And at the same time, as the schedule is supposedly getting harder, which I do think it is, they have to play the Eagles, who are somehow one of the best teams in the NFL. But at the same time, I've watched enough Chiefs games to know that there's issues there. The Chiefs are not playing that great football. I've watched the Chargers play football. They're not really that good. So all these things where it's yes, the schedule is getting harder. I'm not going to deny that. I don't think it's that this giant gauntlet the Bills have to run through that everyone's making out to be. I think they could go on a run and finish the season with 11 wins if they're lucky, but 10 wins will probably be enough to get into the playoffs.
I certainly hope so. And I have the belief that this team could reach that mark. And I think one thing that we've noticed, if you've watched really any of the other teams in this league, and this is kind of an important thing when you talk about being a fan and having perspective of your team versus the contemporaries, is while there are teams with better records, when you look at how these teams are playing their games and kind of the tightness of their games, you notice that the discrepancy between the 7-win teams, with the exception of, and I'm sure this guy in the chat, Aaron Butler, who's on a Lamar campaign right now, would appreciate this comment. The Ravens, I think, currently are the best and most complete team in our conference. When you look at teams like Miami, Kansas City, you look at the Chargers, you've looked at the Bengals in weeks past, although the Bengals obviously have been playing much better ball over the past couple of weeks. They've had their share of offensive miscues. They've had their share of defensive miscues. There have been reasons that those games have been close. And I think when you want to talk about the potential reason to believe that this team could actually go on a run is because, like you said, the gap as far as how these teams are winning their games, with the exception, I would say, of Baltimore, who are not even playing this year unless we somehow match up with them in the playoffs, isn't particularly wide. They have been playing competitive football. And I know someone in the chat was mentioning, well, they should beat the Broncos easily. The Chiefs just lost to the Broncos in Denver, man. That's what happens. You play teams that, it's a game of hot streaks. It's a game of momentum. And when you deal with the team that's kind of finding its wings and being a bit more resurgent, that's when you deal with this issue of okay, this team might have a bad record, but they can win any single week. And usually it sounds kind of like a defeatist mindset, but when you look at teams that have losing streaks, at teams that lose the things to play for, I generally chalk that game as one that I hope they take seriously because you can't sleep on anybody. And Denver is a team that I don't want them to sleep on, and I hope they're not. And losing to Cincy and Josh's record coming off of a loss is very good. But still, it's one of those situations where I don't doubt that they could go on a run, but I think this team is in a position now where they have to prove it to us so we can have the confidence that they would. And this is an opportunity to, Uber. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And just wanted to quickly go back to that Denver thing. Like the Chiefs played Denver twice in a 3-week span and didn't look good in either game, and they went 1-1 against that team. So the idea that if you can't compete with consistently with a team like Denver, that you're not a Super Bowl contender just doesn't hold any weight unless you want to say the Chiefs can't win the Super Bowl, which I'm not going to say. I think the Chiefs are undoubtedly a Super Bowl contender. In fact, I think that they're the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. So I I look at this game and I look at the Bills going in to play the Broncos in Orchard Park, and it's a game that I expect the Bills to win. I think that the Bills will win,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's not a gimme. And no game this season is really a gimme, unless like if the Bills played the Panthers, I'd probably pick them to win by 21 points. But
Yep.
other than the Panthers, like you could put the Bills against any team, and I'd be like, I could see that team winning. I could see the Bills winning, and it's the
Yep.
same with basically any team in the NFL, including the Eagles, including the Ravens to a point. Like the Ravens lost to the Texans, who have been playing well, but the Texans went and lost to the Panthers. So there's
Yep.
all this weird parity in the NFL this season. It makes for a fun league. It makes for a frustration within our fan base as the Bills struggle against teams that they should beat.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, Roy even points it out here. Jets beat Philly. Philly's a Super Bowl team. Baltimore lost to Indy and Pitt. One could argue Baltimore's a Super Bowl caliber any given Sunday. And that's the thing. Like, you think about the average NFL schedule and you think about the teams that have won the Super Bowl over the past few years, there's losses on those schedule that frankly shouldn't have been there, but they were. The Chiefs last year lost to an Indianapolis Colts team with an aging Matt Ryan and a very limited receiving core. And you see that a good team can lose to a bad team any part of the week. And that's kind of what I'm trying to kind of reinforce is this team is in a bad spot right now. The Buffalo Bills are in a bad spot. There's no denying it. No one in this network denies that the performance from the Buffalo Bills is underwhelming. It's been poor. You don't want to be 5-4 in the easy part of your schedule. What we try to kind of preach and what I try to tell people is it's really just a matter of getting hot at the right time and understanding that this team has been in similar positions, and good teams like the Bills have been in similar positions and have been able to go on these runs and been able to figure it out over the course of the season. So while it's bleak now, don't write off the idea that this team could go on a resurgent run. Again, I'll believe it when I see it, but you play Denver at home, you play the Jets at home, and then you play Philadelphia and Philly. Obviously, that third game is probably, given what we know about these teams right now, the toughest you're going to play. But if you have a very realistic chance to be a 7-4 team going into that game, which, by the way, if you are in 3 games above 500, you probably are still very well competing for your division like you are now, in a much better spot for the playoffs, because you also don't know what the rest of the AFC will look like in 2 weeks. So I think like the state of the Bills right now is things are bleak. I'm answering that question before we get into the problems, Uber. But I don't think it's impossible for them to get out of this hole. I think they can climb out of it, but they need to show us that they can put together a complete game. And it's tough for them to do it right now, frankly, just because of some of the injuries and the miscues.
Yeah, and as far as the schedule goes, like really, like I'm looking at it right now. That Eagles game is going to be really hard. I'll say right now, I'm probably going to easily pick the Eagles to beat the Bills that game. I just don't think that the Bills, in their current state, match up well against the Eagles. Outside of that, I could see the Bills winning all the other games. I'm not saying I'm going to pick them or they will win all those other games. They should beat the Broncos. They should beat the Jets. They win every time after their bye week in the Sean McDermott era. They could beat the Chiefs. We've seen them go to Kansas City and beat the Chiefs before. Then Dallas has to come to Buffalo. You're going to take Dak Prescott and take him out of a dome and put him in cold weather. That doesn't seem like a recipe for success for Dallas. The Chargers don't have home field advantage in LA, so the Bills have to go there. That should just be kind of a street fight, Justin Herbert versus Josh Allen. I'll take Josh Allen over Justin Herbert. New England at home, that's a game you should win. And then you go play Miami in Miami, a team that Josh Allen has historically dominated. So I know the schedule is harder. It's way harder than playing the Giants, playing the Bucks, playing the Patriots. But there are ways that the Bills have advantages in these games. These are winnable games. It's not like they should, lose out the season and go 5-12 and people can be like, "Ooh, yay, we get a top 5 pick." No, that's not going to happen. This team is too good unless you believe Josh Allen sucks. If you believe Josh Allen sucks, then they'll go 5-12. But he doesn't. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
leading the league in touchdowns. And
Yeah.
I'm not even going to get into the Josh Allen discourse here. I'm tired, man. It's been an exhausting couple weeks in the defense. But I mean, again, when I say that, that also doesn't absolve Josh of having a hand in some of the issues offensively that we've seen. And that's something that I want to reinforce too. Like when we talk about some of these takes and we've seen like what the past couple of weeks have looked like amongst this fan base, I want to stress that saying one thing doesn't automatically discredit the other end of the coin. If I say Josh Allen's leading the league in touchdowns, it doesn't mean I'm ignoring that turnovers are still an issue. If I'm saying turnovers are an issue, it doesn't mean I'm ignoring that Josh Allen leads the league in touchdowns. And that's the case for the team. Again, like when we point out things, like provide empirical evidence that this team's offense is moving the ball well and they're getting yards, but we say like, okay, so they're I think last week they were ranked third in EPA. So you have them at this spot. That's not disregarding what we're seeing on the field. That's just simply saying, okay, this offense is very clearly moving. What's the issue? Let's find it. And this might point to a potential resurgence going forward because generally teams that sit in that spot in the EPA rankings are good offenses that will eventually match the mean and start scoring. And that's the problem, is they're not scoring enough and not figuring it out quickly enough and not sustaining drives, which that's a problem, but it doesn't deny the fact that they look good, and that's what the evidence is for, the data. So I just I want to stress to everybody, it can go both ways. These conversations can be balanced. These conversations about the team can be critical and fair, but it doesn't mean we have to also deny the fact that this team could potentially go on a run and hopefully get better. But while we talk about this, I want to talk about the team's really biggest issues, because obviously during this past month, it's just been a struggle at times. You've seen this team have issues on really all three phases. And before we went live and when we were talking about this show this week, I said, come up with three of your biggest issues. We'll share them on air. I think I spoiled one for you and you spoiled one for me. But I want you to lead it off. Give me your from least to most. So third to first, your issues facing the Buffalo Bills right now.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go with the intangible, or is it untangible? I'm not really sure what the proper word is there. Intangible one first, just because I think that a good team should be able to overcome that. And that's luck. I know people are going to be frustrated by one of the biggest issues being referred to as luck, but I really do look at this team and I think luck is plaguing them, whether that be injury luck, whether that be the way the ball is bouncing, whether that just be like weird occurrences throughout the game. The Bills seem to be this just tragically unlucky team, both last year and this year. And I think that's causing major issues for them. So let's just breaking down some parts of this luck, right? Trey White pops his Achilles, just randomly non-contact. Like, that's very unlucky. You look at Matt Milano getting his leg caught in a weird spot and snapping that. You look at Daquan Jones injuring himself, just reaching out for a tackle and tearing I believe he tore his pec. You look at Terrell Bernard getting a concussion last week. You look at Christian Benford pulling a hammy, Dawson Knox hurting his hand, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on and on. Micah Hyde just getting, I don't think we even fully know the injury. It's a neck injury, but he was hit by Cordell Volson randomly after a play. These are all unlucky occurrences that you really can't control. There's other unlucky occurrences that I believe you can control. So one example of luck for the Bills is they fumbled the ball 7 times. That's all, which is actually pretty impressive number. They've lost 5 of them. That's ridiculous. That loss rate in fumbles just is not consistent with the rest of the NFL. You look at the Miami Dolphins, for instance, they've fumbled the ball 16 times on offense. They've also lost 5 of them. So they're luckily getting the ball back. The ball's bouncing their way. You have the ability to control that, right? Simply don't fumble. That's easy enough. Then that luck gets taken out of the window. But in games, you're eventually going to do that. And for the Bills, the ball just doesn't seem to be bouncing their way in certain cases. The injuries are piling up, and there's a whole slew of other issues where I do believe luck is a factor. And while you can't, calculate luck, while I can't put a statistic in front of your face and say, look, the Bills are the most unlucky team in the NFL. I think that we can all agree in watching it, in the way the Bills have kind of dealt with things the past 2 years, luck is a factor, and the Bills are frankly one of the most unlucky teams I've ever seen.
I firmly agree with that. And luck, a lot of people, when you bring up the concept of luck, it angers people because it seems like cope. It's not. You have to
Yeah.
talk about a physical game with the possibility that there are just circumstances that go beyond your control. And I think that goes for execution and plays, that goes for coaching, that goes for just anything, really. Like you talk about a team that's designed to, let's just say the Bills, like in the playoff game last year. And this is a criticism of maybe the team construction, which is perfectly fair, but the team's not anticipating, going into adverse weather and how that slows you down if that's your style. Now, again, that should be something you think about in foresight, but the reality is the likelihood of that happening versus getting a game where maybe it's not snowing, like those things matter, and those are outside forces that you simply can't control and you have to adjust for. And when it comes to the team this year, I look at a team that, they've been frankly unlucky at times. You look at, again, what you just mentioned before about the fumbling rate, which, by the way, like we've all wanted the fumble rate to go down with this team. It did. I want to just quickly interject and say, think about some of the criticisms of this team in the offseason that have actually been addressed and have gotten better in a way. And yet they're still 5-4. Of course, you know what I mean? You talk about cleaning up the fumbles. Well, the fumbles have been cleaned up, but they're still 5-4. You talk about all right, we want Josh to kind of be more accurate and be more methodical. He is. They're still 5-4. Things in that regard. It just goes to show you that there is a thin margin of error when you play games in the NFL too. And I think back to when we talked about the Vikings last year, right? The Vikings, who were an unsustainable team, by winning as many games as they did, one-score games that no team in the NFL did, despite having a negative point differential. Those things happen in the NFL. And with the Bills, I do think luck does play a part in some of the woes they've dealt with. You look at certain plays in certain games, and you could call back to the Jets game and Patriots games, for examples, things that are kind of out of your control that had they just gone your way, change it, and very realistically have this as a 7-2 team that we're all complaining about instead of a 5-4 team that we're all complaining about. It makes things a bit more dire, and unfortunately, that is the way it breaks. I'm going to say, sorry, Uber, go on.
No, just wanted to throw one more thing out there too, because I've also been ripped for this on Twitter. I don't make excuses for this team either. I do believe, for instance, weather is a luck factor. For instance, you go back to the Bills-Patriots game a few years ago where you had basically this giant bomb cyclone or something coming in and crazy weather that fit the Patriots style way better than the Bills style. The Bills lost that game. The Bills still should have won that game. Undoubtedly, the Bills should have won that game. The weather is not an excuse. Same thing with Miami last year. I know there's a lot of fans that constantly gripe about the fact that the Bills were drenched in sun all game and they got worn down. Well, the Bills still should have won that game if Josh Allen can elevate the ball a little bit to Isaiah McKenzie. And it's the same thing throughout this season too. I do believe luck is kind of working against the Bills in a way. I don't believe it's necessarily an excuse for their losses. All these moments are all these games that they have lost, they've had their moments in those games where they've been able to flip the page and say, okay, all this bad luck, that sucks for us, but we can still go win this game. And they're just not doing it right now because there's other bigger issues at play for them.
100%. Yeah. When you talk about luck is not saying, oh man, this is just, they would be a great team if it wasn't for luck. No, we know that they still have to execute. We know there's still so much more that goes into it. And again, when you talk about the Bills and you talk about weather, and I just brought it up, but again, that doesn't excuse the fact that roster construction matters. And this is not me shitting on Brandon Beane. I'm a very big fan of Brandon Beane, but it's me also saying all right, but if we're playing in Buffalo and we're entering cold weather games and potential wind tunnel games, why do we not have as effective of a rushing attack? How do we assess this? Did we build it the right way or is it execution errors? So but at the same time, again, flip side of the coin, if you want to talk about luck, it does matter to a degree, because if you're not getting bounces that go your way, if you're not getting things that go your way, and there are just some outside circumstances that really you didn't foresee, that does make a bit of an impact. And I think it is worth mentioning. But I agree with you that it matters. It matters to me. It's not on my list. I'm actually going to start my third biggest problem with the Bills special teams, which is something that I don't think has really been discussed all that much in the wake of this discourse, but has been kind of a, if you want to call it a puppeteering factor into some of the woes this team's dealt with. And the thing is, it's not consistently bad, right? We're not saying every single week they're giving up, a punt return touchdown or returners are fumbling and giving the ball up. but the play has been a bit inconsistent and the penalties have been there as well, which I think is a massive factor for this offense. When we talk about field position, I feel like part of the conversation in the wake of this recent skid has to be more attentive to the special teams. Right now, they are the 19th in DVOA special teams unit in the league. So bottom half of the league, basically. It's not something that I think in years past has been too much of an issue, but it feels like now it's rearing its ugly head. And I think the thing is, good teams can overcome the woes, right? So when the Bills, for as explosive as they've been in years past, when you can generate a massive chunk play very quickly, and you can get the ball down the field in a hurry, and you bypass the long sustained drive of 10 plus plays to make it 5, to make it 6, whatever, you can not disregard. You can, I guess, forgive poor starting field position because you have a hit in your offense, like a sucker punch for a defense that can allow you to move the ball quickly, bypass the fact that you started at your own 10 or your own 19 or whatever, and then you can elevate the play of your whole team. And when you know that you can be explosive, that then provides an element of fear to other teams. Like, they can pop off at any second. We'll try to pin you back, but if we pin you back and it doesn't work, then, damn. I think the problem is now, because this team is lacking that punch, because they're lacking the explosive component, and I'll get more into detail on this because there's more points to be said about some of the other problems. I think that special teams woes become more visible and more impactful. And again, I point back to this Tampa Bay game because it infuriated me. You cannot have consistent penalties on the return team that lead to taking Hardy's really good returns out of their spots and putting an offense that, frankly, while they were moving the ball, again, weren't finishing, and Tampa Bay's defense eventually settled down a bit. You cannot put the ball in those spots for your offense. You have to play cleaner. You have to play more effectively. And I find that right now, they are not a top special teams unit. And I think that is having some pull. And Uber, before we get back to our conversation, I want to shout out Whittle here because he donated. Thank you so much, Whittle. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for watching. And I'm going to read this, which says, why won't the Bills run the damn ball from under center in the opponent's territory? Just watch the Brett Coleman video, and I'm angrier at Dorsey. I appreciate the comment, man. Listen, play calling matters. To be honest with you, I'm not in their head. I can't explain to you the why for this as much as I could say. I do want to see some more under center running, especially in the red zone. When you have a power back like Latavius Murray, when you have this person that can bruise and get ahead for a couple of yards, I'd like to see them do it more. I don't know if it has to do with maybe them wanting to have Josh see the red zone more effectively, so they do the shotgun, and then if Josh has to take off, he can, or move around, he can. That could be a part of it, but considering that I'm not really a huge fan of trying to plow James Cook through a formation that tight in the red zone, I want to see Fournette under center. I think that's a perfectly valid complaint and criticism. And again, like, we could talk about Ken Dorsey coming up. I do think that that's part of the discourse that needs to be had, but I think I would like to see more under center running from them. As to why they don't, I don't know. I wish I could answer that question. I mean, Uber, do you have any answer for this? Anything you could think of?
I think there is something. I'm not 100% positive on this, but I believe that Josh has spoken about he likes to be in shotgun better because he can see the field better. I'm not 100% sure on that. So you can quote me on that and then tell me I'm wrong. If you're going to tell me I'm wrong, that's fine. I might be wrong on this, but I do recall him saying something like that. So that might just be Josh likes being back there. But at some point, your offense coordinator has to say, well, wait a minute. It's better if we're in this situation because we can run the ball better through these different gaps with a player like Latavius Murray or Leonard Fournette if you're under center. I don't know. It's frustrating. There's undoubtedly frustrating moments over the past few weeks in regards to their formation, especially in the red zone. Like, why are we doing shotgun draws on the 2-yard line when you have a freak unicorn alien at quarterback that should just be under center plowing through everybody? But that's probably another gripe that we're going to have once we keep flowing through these biggest issues.
100%. But Whittle, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. And to answer Spin's question, what I'm saying is kind of the methodology of it. It's not that I'm saying Josh seeing the field as in they're going to line up because they have a red zone play call. That's probably an option. Maybe you hand it off to Murray. Maybe you keep it in Allen's hands. Maybe they want the idea of Josh being able to line up in this formation and see it, because if they want to hand it off, they can. Or maybe someone breaks open and he can hand. But I think just in general, having them line up under center more makes sense in those spots. Like, don't overthink it. And if it gets shut down, then you can transition to options for Josh where maybe you allow him to see what's in front of him. And then if he sees that there's a gap, he can hand it off. If not, sling it. That's really what I'm trying to say with this. Not, it's not denying that they still need to run under center, but let's move on now. So let's hear your number 2 biggest issue for this team.
Oh, number 2 biggest issue. Okay. And I guess I'll dive into a little bit of the Dorsey issue here and the Bills offense holistically. So we've seen an offense that's much more controlled this season, is kind of ignoring the big plays and going more to a consistent approach. Let's move the ball down the field. Let's throw the ball short. Let's try to pick up a little bit of yak, et cetera, et cetera. I think that works to a point. And I actually enjoy watching it a little bit because you're seeing Josh Allen's accuracy kind of jump up a little bit here. And you're seeing that kind of debate people have about him. And interesting enough, because I see a lot of comments from a certain person about Lamar Jackson in the comment section here.
Shout out to Aaron.
It's pretty wild that the Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen coming out of college, 2 of the biggest issues people have with them is like, oh, they just can't be accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. Well, these guys basically lead the league in completion percentage this season, which is kind of hilarious. But that being said, I got to see the Bills hit those big plays more. Yep. And there's 2 issues there. There's one, they're not really calling the big plays, or the route trees that they're kind of combining aren't setting the offense up for success on the big plays. The second one, which really hasn't gone discussed all that much, Josh isn't hitting the deep ball.
Yep.
I don't know what the hell is going on. He's missing the deep ball by 5, 6, 7 yards at times. And it's like, he's got the guy, running full speed, and he's just missing the throw. Josh has to start hitting those. And I feel like that's kind of a dam waiting to break. The second he hits one, that confidence shoots up, and all of a sudden he hits 2, 3, 4 over the next few weeks. So I think for me, a big issue here is just the consistent approach works to a point, but the Bills have to hit the big ones now, especially with the injuries on defense. The Bills need to not only jump out to a lead quickly, but they need to jump out to a big lead so that they can force the opposing offense to stay in a specific style of play where they have to throw the ball all game, so that the defense kind of can gain an advantage when they're completely at a disadvantage right now, missing, half their starters. So for me, again, offense, big boom plays. They need more of them. And if that's at the expense of their consistency, moving the ball down the field, that's fine by me.
Yeah, because again, moving the ball down the field and not finishing is essentially the same as just stalling out. Like, field position battle matters, but if you're talking about total points and this team just needing to kind of galvanize on offense, I want to see the explosive way come back. And, I want to chalk it up because Roy asked earlier, and I didn't forget about this comment, Roy. I just wanted to wait till we kind of got to this topic. But it seems like the offense is lacking big plays, the ponder emoji. Are they, or does it just seem like it? No, they're lacking big plays. And it's not that they haven't had a willingness to call explosive options for Josh, because again, you look at Cincinnati, you look at New England, you look at, honestly, the Giants game, which, by the way, like, I'm sure there were 2 big downfield plays schemed up for Gabe Davis and Trent Sherfield, and both got tripped up. So that we kind of forget about that getting called. They have been chalking up the explosive plays, but a part of it is either defenses read it and it's taken away, and the other part is Josh Allen not hitting the explosive play. Again, the throw to Deontay Hardy, I understood the play call on 1st and 10. Now, Allen did have the option to take the underneath route. I forgot who was open. It was either Cook or it was Shakir. I can't quite remember. But that ball to Hardy went to the wrong part of the field. Hardy couldn't get separation because the ball was on top of him. So there's no reason for whoever was covering him to break. If he throws that ball to the center of the field, and shout out to Ben Solak for pointing this out, because that video is really great if you haven't seen it. If he drops it to the middle of the field, Hardy has the ability to pull away and actually make a play on the ball. And in the game against New England, Stephon Diggs had a step on his coverage, wide open. Josh Allen missed it. Like, that is a part of the issue with the explosive component. And I think if you want to critique this offense and say maybe the inability to get this explosive play is caused by maybe Josh's rhythm, and maybe he's not feeling it right and he's not getting the right step, and his footwork isn't good, and maybe it's because he's adjusted to a shorter style. I guess, but I also think like Josh is an NFL quarterback. You have to be able to hit the explosives in addition to hitting these shorter options. I don't think Josh is doing that consistently. I think Josh can, but it's not happening often enough. And really, that's kind of the issue. It's an execution problem. But I also do think they could stand to call more of it. And I think you can earn that if you just get a little more creative, which is a Ken Dorsey problem. Again, like I'm going to call back to what Eric has said and kind of the general discourse and the complaints about Ken Dorsey that I do think are a problem is the fact that it's asking too much of the players and not enough on your play caller. Like when you chalk up a coverage beating play, that's fine and dandy, but you have to give them more to work with too. You know, when you're asking so much of these guys and they have to pick their spots and kind of essentially like figure out the option they want to run, like it's a lot to think about and it could slow things down to a point where you're a tick off. And I find that if Ken Dorsey can get a bit more creative with coverage beating plays where he's not just calling it, but also maybe this player does really well in this spot. Why don't we chalk something up to him and get the ball to him because they're playing this type of coverage? Like I'd be really, really on board with seeing that, but I don't think you have yet. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, that is a completely valid criticism of Ken Dorsey. And I think that Eric and Anthony have done good jobs in the film room kind of detailing the lack of creativity for the Bills as far as that, you know, these deep plays go or just the passing concepts in general. I also just, I'm Josh just isn't hitting it right now. And it's frustrating because I believe last year, it was either last year or the year prior, Josh was ranked the #1 deep ball passer in NFL history in the single season. I think it was last year. He was hitting everything deep, and now he's essentially hitting nothing deep. So we're kind of in this stalling pattern where we can't hit the big plays due to execution, and we're not getting enough big play opportunities because of the play calls.
Yeah, and again, last year, and a part of it could be Josh's shoulder too. Like that's another thing. It's not an excuse, but when you talk about having like whatever ailment he's dealing with, it does have to be talked about that if there are some uncharacteristic misses from a guy who's given you evidence that he can hit these throws in the past, that maybe it is affecting him. And maybe it is something that's irritating enough throughout the course of a game, considering that's the arm you used to throw, that it's messing up your deep ball accuracy. It's messing these things up. But I don't think it's the end all be all. Again, not an excuse, just something I point out. Because again, like you look at the quarterback we just played in Joe Burrow, and he was very clearly not himself as he was rehabbing his calf injury. But as time goes on, he starts to get healthier. You see him play to his old form. And I think that can happen for Josh. But it is okay to call out Josh for some of the explosives not being executed well either, because at some point, your quarterback's got to make that play, especially in big games like against the Bengals. And Whittle, man, thank you so much. I appreciate you, dude. This is awesome. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for the contribution. Guys in the chat, thank you all too. I appreciate everyone joining our discourse today. I'm really happy to keep bringing you on the screen. Really appreciate you watching. Smash that like button in the description below. Again, I can't roll the videos because StreamYard is being a jerk to me today, so I cannot show you the promo because it's going to crash my computer or just crash it for the time being. But the Cover One Premium Pass is in the description below. I implore you all to check it out, please. It is a great opportunity to get some really cool insight from our network. Just truly something that is well worth your time if you're a fan of the Bills and want to hear some really interesting analysis from all of the guys at Cover One and some really cool behind-the-scenes features as well. And an awesome t-shirt. But Whittle, you say, tell Josh to shut up, cash his check, hurdle people, and do what it takes to win a Super Bowl. He can be comfortable in the offseason. And then in all caps, tired of losing. I'm tired of losing too, dude. Yeah. I am. Trust me. Like, it's frustrating. We are allowed to be angry at the results. I firmly understand the fan base's anger and tension and want for more. Like, I want the same things as you, man. Trust me. I just think like when we talk about this team and we go about it, it's just so multifaceted in points of blame that it's hard to really just wrap your head around one thing. Like, we got to be open to the idea. And not saying you, Whittle, like Whittle, we talked plenty of times. I know you have a pretty good like head on this whole thing, but so much has gone wrong, and there are a lot of things that get overshadowed by it, and a lot of cause and effect that leads to kind of some skewed perspectives. And I just think that it's not easy to say what's fully wrong with this team, which is why I asked for 3 specific reasons, and that's being generous. But man, yeah, this is a fun episode, man.
Beers on Whittle tonight, so
yeah. Shout out to Whittle, man. $10. I might be able to. I'm only $2 in the hole on a New York City beer. Anyways. Thank you so much, Whittle. I appreciate you for this. Let's move on. Uber, let me hear your number one. Let's get this
Yeah.
real big issue. What do you think it is?
Turnovers. Turnovers is the biggest statistic to me in all of football. If you turn over the ball more than your opponent, then you're probably going to lose the football game. In seasons past, the Bills could get away with losing the turnover battle by not just one turnover, but by two, because they were so good on both offense and defense. They're not good on defense right now, mainly due to injuries. So at this point in time, when the Bills lose the turnover battle by one turnover, they're probably going to lose the game. If they lose by two turnovers, they're almost assuredly going to lose the game. If they lose by 3 or 4, yeah, you can chalk it up as an L already. The Bills have consistently turned the ball over this season. It's actually pretty wild to look at. They have a total of 2 games where they didn't turn the ball over. That was week 2 and week 4. And then in week 3, they turned the ball over 1 time. Since then, so since starting in week 5, they turned the ball over twice, once, twice. You can't turn the ball over that consistently and meanwhile not get takeaways on defense. Since week 5, they have had 2 takeaways, 0 takeaways, 1 takeaway, 0 takeaways, 0 takeaways. So they've had the last 4 games, they've only taken the ball away once, and they've turned the ball over a total of 7 times. You can't win football games doing that on a consistent basis. So if this goes back to the Josh Allen issue, right? I will live and die with Josh Allen because I do believe that he is probably the second best quarterback in the NFL. Actually, this season, I think he's playing like the best quarterback in the NFL. But turning the ball over is an issue when your defense can't take the ball away. And right now, the Bills just don't have the talent on the defensive side of the ball to take the away because opponents can essentially say, I'm going to target these deficiencies on defense. So the Bills are struggling to jump routes, right? The second Trey White went down, the secondary got significantly worse. However, the Bills had the ability at linebacker and defensive line to cover up the issues in the secondary. Then Matt Milano went down. Now you have to cover up your linebackers as well as your secondary. Then Daquan Jones went down. Now you have to cover up all 3 levels. It's just not possible. So Sean McDermott's scheming up all these ideas to try to protect these units. That's why he blitzed so much against the Bengals. He had no other option. But they're just not taking the ball away. That's why when you bring in a player like Rasul Douglas, there's some excitement there that maybe Douglas can be the guy that starts taking the ball away. Linval Joseph, maybe he can cover up Ed Oliver and give Ed Oliver more space to get after the quarterback again. The turnover issue is a real issue. And if you see Josh turned the ball over 2 times against the Broncos and Russell Wilson turned the ball over 0 times, the Broncos probably going to beat the Bills in that game.
Yeah, no, that's a scary thought. And dude, Whittle's the MVP, man. Thank you so much, dude. I can't say thank you enough. Seriously, this is awesome. I really appreciate you doing this and watching and your contributions. This is very, very much appreciated. And the comment is, grab your beer, Joe. Pour a sip out for Trey White's injured lower body with the crying emoji. Yes, I miss Trey White dearly. We all miss Trey White. Again, I have his jersey in my closet. He's one of my favorite players. I am rooting for him to get better. I hope he gets better and he could come back at full strength. We will see. And real quick, before I go over, I just want to bring this comment up. There is definitely something wrong with Josh's shoulder. He's been on the injury report every week. He was delayed in coming out for warmups because he was likely getting injections on the shoulder. He's been in visible pain and he's gone in the blue tent. It's not BS. There is a genuine injury to Josh's shoulder. It's just not severe enough to keep him out of a game, but he is absolutely playing with discomfort, especially after consistent throws at all different arm angles and also getting hit. There is something wrong with Josh's shoulder. We will establish that right now. There is absolutely something wrong with that. If it's not an excuse to say that he should, like, we should use it as like the crutch that, oh, well, you know, he missed the throw, it's his shoulder. He still's got to hit his throws, but there's something wrong with Josh's shoulder. There's absolutely an injury there. To go off your point, Uber, I think what you describe when you talk about the back and forth turnover battle between offense and defense bleeds into the phrase that this fan base hates hearing, but it's the right thing to call, in my opinion, the number one issue with this team. The inability to play complementary football on both sides. Yeah. And I'm sorry I had to use the term. If you leave the show because I just used the term complementary football, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And let me explain. When you go into this season and you have your roster constructed the way it is, and you have the kind of philosophy that we were boxed really deeply into a corner last year, right? We were very explosive, but we didn't have that other component of our offense, right? We couldn't run the ball really that effectively, or we did, and we got away from it because we relied a lot on Josh Allen. Allen's, elbow injury bled them to only really be able to have accuracy deep, which is kind of insane to think about. And I'm not saying like his numbers were like, oh, his completion percentage was in the 70s way through deep. No, I mean, just like it was easier for him to take explosive shots than to have midfield accuracy. And you saw that on display when they played Detroit, Cleveland, Minnesota, like that ugly November stretch they had last year. They got very reliant on explosives. So when you see this, you go into the playoffs, you see that Miami game, which gets very ugly because a lot of really bad turnovers from Josh Allen, followed by a really good Bengals defense taking that away from you and not having the ability to adjust to something different and losing that game because you could only score 10 points, with your lone touchdown being, go figure, a Josh Allen rushing touchdown. Yeah. You go into this offseason with this idea that you want to bring more balance to your offense. And again, another word that people hate hearing. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have both components. And there's nothing wrong with having the opportunity to throw it deep, but also know that depending on game situation, we have to earn our shots and be methodical. So to have this style of offense where they run more 12 personnel, they use tight ends over the middle of the field more, they are trying to move the ball, effectively, early first down chunk plays, second down chunk plays. That's fine. And the defense's construction with Sean McDermott at the helm is one that is meant to be attack minded. It's one that's meant to be pressure heavy, and it's one that's meant to be opportunistic. And in the first few weeks of the season, even in the ugly Jets game, which looked worse because Josh Allen turned the ball over 4 times, you see that philosophy on display. And when they play Washington, Vegas, Miami, even at full health on defense, you just see how the pairing works together. A methodical, attack-minded approach coupled in with pressure and turnovers. You see the results that lead to you believing that the Bills are a Super Bowl contending team, because when all that worked, they were 100%. But my thing is, like we alluded to before, Uber, and like everyone has seen and we're all aware, you deal with the injuries, you lose key cornerstone position players on defense. Now, like you were alluding to, your defense cannot be as attack-minded because they are not as good at getting pressure, because your double team taking interior defensive tackle, who is your starter, tears his pack out probably until the end of December, assuming that they're in a spot where they want to bring him back. Your starting cornerback, who was back to playing at an all-pro level, goes down. And granted, I think the cornerback play has actually still been pretty good, but you lose an established starter. You have to rely more on depth. And those little things that Trey White can take away are no longer being taken away. And then Matt Milano goes down. Now, all of a sudden, you try to rely on subpar linebacker play. And I don't think that I've defended Dorian Williams. I do think he could still be good as a depth player. However, right now he's learning. It's growing pains. And because of that, it's a weakness. Paired with Tyrell Dodson, you now deal with the hole. Yeah. You now deal with the hole at that spot. And you deal with holes at key positions. It weakens the defensive structure. It makes teams able to move the ball more effectively. It makes getting off the field harder to do. Getting off the field at a slower rate means the team's moving the ball, getting more first downs. And even if you force them to either stall out or get 3 points, your field, really not even 3 points, stall out, you are now ending up in worse field position spots. That then goes into the offense, where this methodical approach that was working and allowing you to kind of have the patience because you could trust your defense to get the ball back to you quickly or get you good field position, that is gone. And now where we are is a team that can't play complementary football because the core structure of being able to do so is so riddled with injuries that it's not its true identity right now. They are currently the 17th ranked DVOA defense in the league. They were top 10 earlier in the season when all the health was intact. This is the issue that I think is plaguing this team. And what I think you are seeing right now is the ugly transitionary period where this team now has to rediscover something that they were good at, which is the explosive plays, because the methodology of being a patient offense cannot successfully be executed because they are not having enough time because of the defense not being able to get off the field quickly. They're not getting turnovers, like you said, so they can't get good field position, or they can't get, even momentum in that, right? And because of this, the margin for error on offense has thinned out to a line so thin, it's basically dental floss. So I think the Bills' biggest problem right now is their inability to play complementary football. And why I think Sean McDermott keeps preaching it is because that's what they were doing and doing well. But because circumstances have changed, they no longer can be complementary. And therefore, they have to meet and figure out a new strategy, because what they are doing right now, unless they execute to perfection on 10 to 14 play drives every time, is not going to work over the sustained course of a season. And when you get to good teams, you are going to flounder. So,
yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on the complementary football, being a major issue. And Sean McDermott keeps talking about that. And a big part, I think, of maybe fan confusion, because at least for me, complementary football my entire lifetime has essentially been somebody saying, well, I want to run the ball and I want to pass the ball. Like, complementary football typically was an offensive term. At least when I was younger, that's what I thought it meant. What Sean McDermott's referring to isn't that. He's saying that the offense and defense work together holistically to help the Bills win football games. And right now, they need the offense to help the defense more than they ever have. And the offense simply isn't. And meanwhile, in turn, the defense isn't doing the same. The defense isn't giving the Bills good field position. They aren't getting takeaways. It's something the Bills are going to have to figure out. And my thought, and I tweeted this out earlier this week, is you need the Bills offense to score quickly. You need them to score a lot early in the game so that the defense can face a one-dimensional offense. That's the only way I can see it working, because frankly, if you look at the Bills' talent on the defensive side of the football, it's probably bottom 10, maybe even lower than that in comparison to the rest of the league. And still, Sean McDermott's trying to find ways to get things out of him. They played well enough to win the game against the Bengals. No, who didn't?
Mm-hmm.
The offense. The offense only put up 18 points. So you need to start playing complementary football where both the offense and defense are driving each other. And because of injuries, the offense is going to have to take the lead on that.
Yeah, and Sean McDermott, really, criticize him as the head coach. This is me calling him as the defensive coordinator right now, not as the head coach, because there were some blunders. There have been blunders the past couple of weeks. Although, again, I wasn't too mad at the punting decisions against Tampa Bay, but against Cincinnati, there were some flaws. Fully agree. You can hang his hat on that. Fine. Yeah. As the defensive coordinator, people are going to hate this sentence, but he's really doing the best he can with it. He is. Yeah. Like, the personnel he has is what he's dealing with. And when you talk about they're getting gashed, sometimes you call the right type of play, but sometimes you don't have the personnel to do it. They're forcing Jordan Poyer. And granted, I like that they do this. I had a whole rant about it on my show last week, but Jordan Poyer playing the dimebacker role in the 3 safety looks was probably not part of their identity going into the season, but rather a pivot, because it's been so poor at the will linebacker position that they need to make an adjustment. And you see kind of this lack of pass rush because, again, Gregory Rousseau's dealing with a foot injury. Leonard Floyd's dealing with a foot injury. Ed Oliver doesn't have Daquan Jones next to him. And frankly, the what's that role has been pretty subpar. And you talk about Epineza, who's been fine. Von Miller's on a snap count getting ramped up. Their pass rush is not effective right now. Having opportunistic linebackers that could shoot gaps helps with that when you try to disguise things. Guess what? Terrell Bernard left the game with a freaking concussion. And Matt Milano is on the IR. So again, he still managed to get Cincinnati off the field and hold them to 3 points in the second half. And that's not me excusing the fact that this team still needs to get off the field quicker, but I can at least understand why it's taking them so long. And my final sentence on my note sheet when I talked about this point is injuries have really devastated the identity of this team. And I think that's still the truth. You are seeing a team that was not prepared to lose Matt Milano long-term, lose Daquan Jones long-term. They can't play the same style of football that they did going into the year, but it is on Sean McDermott, Ken Dorsey, to figure out a way to pivot. And if we see the strategy continue on, then the criticism of Ken Dorsey, of Sean McDermott, is even more valid. And I will support saying that Sean McDermott needs to prove that he can transition and find a different style, or at least try to get his team to play a different style. Because if they can't, that is a huge problem, given the fact that this team is in a window right now, if you believe in that kind of thing for other people. For me, again, I think Josh Allen will always keep your window open, but a team that has a really good chance to win this year. And before, I'm sorry, Uber, I don't mean to go, but
no, I know exactly where you're going. Yep.
Yeah. Linda did donate, and I want to shout her out. Thank you so much, Linda West. I appreciate you watching. And the question is, Is there such a thing as calling in an outside quote unquote ringer or expert to help the coaches and team over this hump and into the Super Bowl? That's an interesting question. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think when I first saw it, I'm like, oh no, no, no. But the more and more I think about it, I don't think it's that crazy. Like to make some phone calls, to talk to at least maybe bring someone in as literally a consultant and saying, hey, I'm noticing this, I'm seeing this in the offense, I'm seeing these deficiencies. Let's try this. What about this? I don't know who that person is. Like in my head, you're you would prefer it to be somebody like a Tom Brady or like a Peyton Manning, but that's just not going to happen. I saw in the comments a little bit like Josh McDaniels' name leaking around. I don't want him
No,
anywhere near
no,
this Bills team
no.
after what happened in Las Vegas. Like if you hear the stories coming out of Las Vegas and the way that the players there perceive Josh McDaniels, keep him a
No.
million miles away from Josh Allen and this team. Yeah, I don't think it's not a crazy idea. It's just I don't know who the expert or the coach would be to bring in.
Yeah, and I think like I understand the sentiment 100%, but you also got to think like this is a staff that has had internal meetings, preparation, practice for the better part of how long has it been now? 5 or 4 months since I can't count. Actually, my math is terrible right now. Just about 4 months. So it's and it would be nice if there was a voice that you could bring in that could kind of galvanize things and get things going in a positive direction. But I just don't think there's someone who you could bring in who could really adjust to how this team is approaching things and see it and instantly call things out. If that existed, I'd be so excited, but I don't know if that's really an option. I would love for it to be, and I do get the point, but until I actually see that in practice, I'm not sure. But I do think that some of the people on the staff for, Ken Dorsey or for Sean McDermott, like, he brings in Al Holcomb to be, an assistant for his defense. For Ken Dorsey, he has Joe Brady there in the room with him. Having former coaches on the staff, I think, brings a lot of value to the team and that helps things out quite a lot. But again, it's Sean McDermott's team to lead. He's not above criticism. I do think that Sean McDermott can clean things up as a head coach. I do think he needs to pivot and transition to be in a better direction, considering that things are simply not working right now against good teams. And if he fails to do so, then even more criticism will be valid. And if we see a change in identity of this team going forward, I will believe that both Dorsey and McDermott get the credit for righting that ship. And I think that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to throw one more point out too, going back to the defense and the injuries, because he might be my favorite player in the NFL right now. And it sucks that we lost him for basically the year in Matt Milano. I hope that people, and I know Bills fans appreciate him, but I hope that people NFL wide are starting to appreciate how talented Matt Milano is after seeing the drop in the Bills defense before and after him. He is so freakishly good. I use this term a lot when I'm kind of doing my write-ups and stuff when teams have these players, but it's rare. I call them game wreckers. And that's not my original term. Obviously, people have used that term forever. There are very few game wreckers in the NFL, though. Like TJ Watt, he's a game wrecker. Myles Garrett, he's a game wrecker. Those are unique players whose talent exudes and stands up above everybody else. Matt Milano is literally in that weight class.
Yeah.
And he was so good that opposing offenses had to specifically game plan for him. That meant when they ran the ball, they didn't want to run anywhere near Matt Milano because they knew he would shoot that gap and make a tackle in the backfield. When they threw the ball, they made sure to know exactly where Matt Milano was because God forbid you throw the ball in his direction, he's going to pick you off. And then meanwhile, their offensive line had to scheme up protections with the idea in mind that Matt Milano might be blitzing the quarterback. So he literally alone, just being on the field, completely changed the game. When you lose a player like that, it's almost impossible to recover, let alone losing Trey White and Daquan Jones as well. You can go to any team in the NFL. You can go to the Steelers, take away TJ Watt. You can go to the Browns, take away Myles Garrett. You could go to the 49ers and take away Fred Warner. If you do that to those teams, those defenses will be nothing compared to what they are right now. So that's why I do think it is a little bit of an excuse for Sean McDermott. Again, doesn't mean he's beyond criticism, but losing a player like Matt Milano, that was such a massive blow to this team. Maybe the biggest injury the Bills have had, and geez, I can't even think when an injury that bad happened. The last one, Matt Milano is so important to this team. It's frustrating, and my only hope and my only faith that this team really has a shot at the Super Bowl is they find a way to sneak into the playoffs. They get there, and Matt Milano somehow is healthy and playing for the Bills.
100%. Yeah, and I was optimistic to say, all right, they got injuries, it's next man up, let's see McDermott do it, but really it just hasn't been able to have the same effect. And granted too, like part of it is you just played Joe Burrow who's healthy. Joe Burrow is a good quarterback. Like you're going up against the cream of the crop, someone people debate is 2 or 3 in the league. Like he's also just going to naturally beat you. That happens. But I do think that the identity of the defense right now is duct taped. It is just a team that is missing its really key components. And I really do hope that Matt Milano comes back, man. That injury was devastating for this defense. But really, guys, this has been a fun discussion. We're not done yet, though. I know I said we were going to go to like 12:05. It might have to be a little bit longer, Uber, if that's okay, because this has been it is a great discussion. But before we carry on to our discussion, well, last discussion of the day, I want to ask you a question, Uber. It's a very important one, and I think you might have an idea of where I'm going with this. But the question I have for you and for everyone in the chat really is, do you like fantasy football?
I love fantasy football, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great news, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I want to tell you about the easiest way to get some action in the NFL. It's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry, get every pick right, and take home some cold, hard cash. Use the code COVER1 and get your first deposit doubled up to $500 by Underdog. Thank you so much to Underdog for being a partner and sponsor of Cover One. I should probably go look at the best ball because I haven't looked in a while and I need to make sure that I'm actually doing good because I genuinely have no idea. But I did take Laporta, I did take Gibbs, I did take Lamar Jackson, so I can't be doing too bad. But anyways, we are going to carry on our conversation because we also have to talk about the upcoming matchup. And I appreciate you giving me your insight into the problems with this team. I agree with everything you said, by the way. That was a really fun discourse, and I'm really hoping that they can correct some things going ahead into Monday night against a team that, listen, their record is their record. We all know that the Broncos had a rough start to the year. They're the 70-point defense. But over the last couple of games, they have seemed to figure something out. Now, granted, they played the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are a mess in their own right. But Kansas City holding them to 9 points. Again, Patrick Mahomes has the flu. I get it. It matters. But also, it's Kansas City, who have seemed to have offensive struggles in their own right, but that's a separate discussion. Denver is a team that is riding high right now. I remember Benjamin Albright on Greg and Aaron's show mentioning that the team's got a little bit of juice now. They won a couple games. There's a little more confidence. And you see a team like Buffalo, who unfortunately is kind of limping at the moment, 5-4, something you could potentially go into their home stadium and pounce on them. Talk to me about this matchup. What are you thinking about just offense versus defense, vice versa, what you're expecting to see and how the Bills can win this game and frankly get a very important conference win?
Yeah. I mean, I start by saying, like, obviously, I think a lot of fans remember the Dolphins dropping 70 points on the Broncos and thinking that this defense is horrendous. It's not the same defense now that it was then, especially in the secondary where there's been some major turnover. Like Fabian Moreau, he's their starting corner opposite Pat Surtain right now. That's happened, I believe, in week 7. Jaquan McMillan is now their nickel corner. That started after the Dolphins game. PJ Locke is their starting safety because Kareem Jackson suspended for headhunting. So you have a major shift in the secondary where you have 3 different players, and the only 2 consistent players are Pat Surtain, who's one of the best corners in the league, and Justin Simmons, who has been an all-pro, pretty consistently throughout his career. So the Bills are going up against a team that the Dolphins didn't play, that no one really played early on in the season. And these past few weeks actually made Patrick Mahomes look rather mortal, let's say. I think that the Bills still have the talent advantage. It's pretty significantly have the talent advantage. Yeah. They should be able to give Josh Allen time in pass pro because the Broncos really don't have many guys that can rush a passer. Baron Browning is an interesting player. They should be able to run the ball. The Broncos' run defense actually stinks. It's basically the worst in the NFL, or maybe second worst, depending on where you look. So the Bills' offense should put up points. And I think when it comes to the Bills needing this win, I think you're going to see a little bit of psychopath Josh Allen in this game where he says, all right, screw it. I'll just do it myself if I have to. And he literally might have to do it himself if Stephon Diggs does have a lingering issue. I still expect him to play, but How
Yeah.
healthy will he be? I don't know.
Yeah, that it's a game that, again, Broncos, I'm not really threatened too much by their pass rush. Any pass rush can hit home at any time,
Yeah.
but as far as consistency and how it's going to manipulate Josh's pocket and what he sees, I have full confidence in Allen to see the field. But really, back end coverage is the concern for me. The Broncos passing defense has played a lot better over the span of the past couple of weeks. And again, you can look at the opponents they faced, with one being genuinely one of the worst examples and one being one of the better examples as far as how much confidence or stock you should put into it. But you still got to respect it. Pat Surtain, Bills legend, he is an all-world corner, debatably one of the best corner talents in the league, and looking to his side, which, again, I think Ben Albright mentioned this, but they're kind of a spot-dependent cornerback room where they're not really shadowing people, but they sit in their specific parts. So moving Diggs around, I think, is going to be a huge part of this game, and be able to kind of really throw him like a chess piece and use him. And hopefully that opens up opportunity for Kincaid and Shakir, and just really trying to exploit that and maybe keep Surtain out of your vision. But also, again, just because their rushing attack, the Bills' rushing attack this year, hasn't been consistent, doesn't mean that it doesn't have a huge opportunity to really dominate in a game like this. Again, we got the healthy offensive line. We still got James Cook, who has shown flashes of brilliance this year. It's really a matter of, if that is the weakness of this team, I want to see Ken Dorsey attack it. And I know explosive components, but a big Aaron Quinn philosophy that I think should be preached is explosives aren't just deep passes. Explosives can be 20-yard runs or a screenplay that leaks out for more than 10. Like, that is the thing I'm trying to see from this team. It's okay to run the ball, because if you're facing a banged up kind of, or not banged up, but kind of a underwhelming rushing defense, take advantage of it. Let James Cook get his licks, sustain drives with the run, move the ball, 5 yards per carry if you have to. If that is something that you could assailably see him doing, then I want you to attack that. And then vice versa. Russell Wilson. I don't think Russell Wilson is cooking like he used to cook. But Russell Wilson this year is not making, like, if you had to talk about the cooks or the products he's made by cooking, he's like a 3 out of 5 like plate level on Yelp, right? Like, you get a dish, it serves its purpose, it has some flavor, seasoned a bit, but it's not like Michelin star good, if you follow. And Wilson, like, that was probably a horrible example, but Russell Wilson hasn't been ultimately terrible. I think Peyton is finally starting to respect his skill set and have the offense kind of tailored to that. And it's really just moving Wilson around, getting him space so we could see the field, allowing him to air it out a bit more if he can. Again, you're talking about some pretty good receivers in Bills legend Jerry Jeudy and Bills legend Cortland Sutton, and just, again, a really sneakily good rushing attack too. That's something that Denver does bring to the table that, again, the Bills rushing defense has been a point of concern. So what are you thinking about that offense facing this Bills defense in more detail?
Yeah, I mean, Russ, he's playing better this year than he was last year, but he's still not the Russell Wilson that was a Hall of Fame lock in Seattle. He's still pretty much a I guess shadow of him version of himself at this point. But as far as the offense goes holistically, like, they're going to try to run the ball on the Bills. That's what they're going to do, because they're going to try to control the clock, keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. So I think they're going to hand the ball off to Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, or even Samaje Perine if they have to. And the Bills are going to have to control that. That's why Terrell Bernard's injury is so concerning for me, because if Terrell Bernard's on the field, I don't really trust that the Bills can consistently stop that rushing attack. Further, though, Russell Wilson only really throws to essentially 3 positions. He throws to Jerry Jeudy out of the slot, Cortland Sutton on the outside, or his running backs. That's it. That's the only three things he throws to. So the Bills are going to have to find ways to shut those down. The ones that concern me is the running backs leaking out of the backfield. We saw with Cincinnati, they used their tight ends to kind of mimic that kind of style of play, and it worked really well. 2 of their tight ends basically scored a touchdown off of that. The Bills are going to have to find ways to contain the Broncos in the intermediate. Like, I'm not really concerned that they're going to hit over the top too often against the Bills. And then meanwhile, the Bills need to win up front. The Bills can win up front. I actually think the Bills defensive line is significantly better than the Broncos offensive line, specifically on the right side, where Mike McGlinchey was basically the biggest signing for the Broncos this offseason, was a name that came over from San Francisco. He got his money to go to Denver. He just hasn't been good in Denver. I think he's given up 5 sacks this season. So if the Bills are going to rush Russell Wilson, it's going to be rushing over Mike McGlinchey with a player like AJ Epinesa, who could have a big game this week. I think the Broncos are going to score. I think they might get into the 20s, but the Bills, I think this week, I, I'm going to put money on it. I think the Bills at least force one turnover, and it might be Rasul Douglas jumping a pass.
Yeah, I'm very excited for an extra week of Rasul Douglas being more acclimated to the playbook, especially now that there's a potential chance that Benford's not playing. And, having him and Dane Jackson, I still feel pretty comfortable with that. I think, this is a big game for the Bills pass rush to kind of right the ship, because last week it was just almost, but not quite for a lot of that game. And the Bengals were punishing them for it too, because downfield coverage actually had moments where it was playing quite well and taking the reads away from Burrow. And again, one of the things that earlier in the year you saw that game plan against Tua was really trying to get him to hold the ball and not having that bailout because the pass rush could hit home. They got Burrow to hold the ball a couple of times, but because they couldn't hit home, they just dumped it off to a running back and punished them for extra yards on a play that really shouldn't have ever happened, because you would expect your rush to hit home. I think in this game, with the line you're playing, with the fact that McGlinchey's struggling, and again, you talk about Wilson and his size being kind of a shorter quarterback, I do think this is a big opportunity for AJ Epineza with his length, his ability to kind of crowd those lanes, take that vision away from Russell Wilson. You might be seeing a game plan tailored to bringing pressure on the side away from Epineza to force Wilson into his hand and maybe have Epineza have a big game. He's a player I'm definitely going to watch, and I'm glad you brought him up. Yeah, I really think it's about just flustering Russell Wilson. It's about making him have a hard time to see the field and make it so that any sort of tempo that he's coming into this game with is immediately washed away. And actually, Nikki G, this is a really good point. I'm actually glad you brought this up too, because I mentioned the flu, but I forgot they did play Denver 2 times in 3 weeks. So you do get that turnaround. You are playing in Denver, obviously a bit, of a familiarity playing a division rival so soon. And honestly, the Broncos defense in that first Chiefs game played pretty well. They were in check. That offense couldn't do anything. And honestly, the offense against Kansas City didn't really do too much, just enough to win because the defense was playing well enough. So I do think that that's an X factor matchup for me on defense is, can we force Russell Wilson to Epeneza's side, make things harder for him, make him have to attempt to moonball every time, or just keep them out of structure? And again, can this interior defensive line shore itself up? Linval Joseph, another player that's going to be here for another week and gets the time to kind of acclimate to the playbook, maybe get a few more reps, even though I still don't think he's going to get a large percentage unless it's absolutely desperate. Can you clog those lanes? Can you take their runs away? And in turn, can you make them one-dimensional and force the game into Russ's hands? Because if you can, I think it's going to be a successful day for the Bills defense, akin to what you saw against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I have one concern, and actually that Denver, Kansas City playing 2 times in 3 weeks span kind of fits into my concern. The Broncos are coming off their bye. So not only are they healthy and fresh, but they've had about 2 weeks to game plan for the Bills. That's concerning to me. It should be concerning basically for everyone. When teams come off the bye, they're historically better than teams that are facing somebody coming off the bye. I'm interested to see how the Broncos come out. If we see the Broncos come out and score on the first drive against the Bills defense, it doesn't really concern me because that just happens every single week. But if they're consistent in the first half, putting up points and slowing down the Bills offense, it's going to the level of concern is going to quickly raise, because that game planning for 2 weeks might, reap benefits heading into Monday night.
Yeah. And man, again, I can't believe that we're at a point where that game against Denver actually has like insane amounts of implications. They have to win. They have to win this game. They're favored by 7 points. I think a 71% chance per FBI to win the game. It's a do or die. It's do or die. There's no excuse. There's 5-4 record in front of you. Make it 6-4, get to 2 games above 500, make your odds easier, stay in the divisional race. Cause I think might've been Spin or someone before brought it up that Miami schedule is pretty soft going ahead just based on the matchups. They only have I think 3 what you could consider hard games in December, but really they're playing a lot of teams that just frankly don't have winning records or aren't threatening. So you have to stay in that race. And I think that this game is pivotal. It's a conference matchup. You got to get those AFC wins if you want to have any chance of decent seeding, and you need to win. There's no excuse for this team. I know we brought up Allen's shoulder. I know we brought up other factors, like all these things on the show, but don't take away from this episode that we are excusing those things to say that if it happens, we can forgive it. No, the Bills need to win this game. They have tools that can help them win this game. If this offense can put together a better performance and show us that we're stepping in the right direction again, and that Cincy game was really just the last time, I'll feel more encouraged. And if this defense can overcome injury and keep Denver in their place and allow themselves to have a nice, confident, momentum building performance, I'll feel a bit better. But ultimately, I need to see those things, and I need to see them win this game, and going forward, just play better. So, yeah. Uber, that's really all I got. You got any final thoughts before we sign off today?
No, I everything you said is exactly where my mind's at. Like, this is I don't believe a game's a must win unless it's literally a must win, like an elimination game. This is about as close as you can get to a must. Like, they lose this game, me, the forever optimist, will be all over Twitter ripping this Bills team apart, saying the season's over. So yeah, they better 100%. Win this football game.
And I'll say this, and it's a bit spicy. I try very hard not to be absolutist. You all know this. I'm very fair most of the time. Sometimes I'll have a take. I try not to have a definitive take. If this offense struggles even worse against this team than they did against Cincinnati, yeah. I think there is a conversation to be had about Ken Dorsey, like a genuine one. But and here are my ifs. If we know watching this team that nothing is getting open, that whatever's being called is inopportunistic, that the coverage beaters, quote unquote, are just so predictable, that defensive backs are jumping on routes, that there's issues that you can chalk up to schematics fully, and that Allen is genuinely just making the best of a bad situation, I will have much more stake in the Ken Dorsey has to go game. I think that would be your straw that breaks the camel's back. I think you've had enough time. I think it would be inexcusable to lay an absolute egg against a team like Denver, who, again, I'm not trying to, if any Broncos fan manages to see this, I'm not trying to brown, poop emoji on you, but I'm just trying to say this is a team that should be putting up points. We have an expectation. We have a standard for this Bills offense. You are playing a Denver team that is 3-5, and while they put together some better performances, your talent on offense should outmatch them easily. And you have matchup advantages. If you lay an egg, and we see it's a scheming issue, and it's not Josh Allen playing like the worst game of his life at a terrible time for reasons that weren't Dorsey's control, like things are open and he's not hitting them or seeing them, I think the conversation is to be had about Ken Dorsey's future in Buffalo, and I think it would be perfectly fair criticism. That's my take.
I'm 100% with you. 100% with you.
My take. I actually had a take, guys. Look at that. I got spicy on the show for once. But Uber Hansen, thank you so much for being here. You are a great guest, and I appreciate your time. Let everyone in this chat, everyone in the community, even if they're not Bills fans, know where they can find you and what you do here at Cover One.
Yeah, you can find me mainly on Twitter at Uber Hansen. At Cover One, I do host the Cover One Roundup along with David Fox on Mondays. This Monday, actually not going to have a show. That'll be air raid hours, doing as they preview the Broncos Bills game. Outside of that, I do write a matchup preview every week for Cover One that comes out usually on Fridays. That's actually up live right now on cover1.net. And then on Wednesdays, I also release a rooting interest post that tells you who you should root for in every single game, every single week, and why to best benefit the Bills. So yeah, that's all the stuff I do.
Yes, a lot of great work coming from him, man. Like, if you read his articles or check out his show, like, one of our most insightful members of our network that provides really good breakdowns, details every single week, busts his ass, and really appreciate your time today, man. And just a couple quick questions before we drop it. If the Bills, this is Roy Collins, if the Bills lose this game, is your next show going to be about the draft? Dude, it might be. I might honestly like just let the show just be me and have like a funeral procession for the Buffalo Bills season. I'll wear like a suit and I'll have everyone in the chat just give me their takes, and I'll let you guys just go rampant. That I'm half joking. I hope that's not our reality by Monday night, Roy. I hope this team's 6-4. We're a little more encouraged going forward. I don't want to live in that timeline. Let's put it that way. And then Nikki G, if we lose this week, do we fire Dorsey during the bye? I think it should be. Again, there's a lot of ifs and a lot of variables, but if it is truly Ken Dorsey's doing, and we are going to see like on the film and looking back that there are just things that are just simply stupid play design, bad calls, things that are really just messing up Josh and messing up the tempo of this offense, that there is it should be. And then if they do this and they still go down the rest of the season and Sean McDermott has addressed that we're not making a change, a little more conversation about criticisms for McDermott. I don't know about outwardly firing McDermott, but a criticism to Sean McDermott, which I think is fair from this fan base. And Bills, which I'm sorry, I'm a bit salty because this team is disappointing me. Bills, which I understand completely. And again, I brought your comment up before. No offense, no harm or anything. And I hope you didn't take that from our side. I truly appreciate you watching us and chiming in. I understand like the feelings and the anger and the anguish of this fan base. We try to look at things objectively, but we also understand the frustrations. And if things continue this way, then conversations are going to need to be had.
Yeah, I'm frustrated too.
100%. We're optimists until we're not optimists anymore. And do you know how hard it is to make an optimist not be an optimist anymore? It's pretty damn hard. So anyways, for Uber Hansen, my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. You were all wonderful today. Again, I implore you, please look in the description, subscribe to the Cover One Premium Pass for some awesome benefits, $60 a year, and you get, draft access, film access, really, really cool content that's being created for you, as well as Underdog Fantasy. You can find the description to sign up for that in the link below. Some cool perks there as well. This was a really fun episode. I apologize we went a little bit longer than expected, but I will be back next weekend, hopefully with a smile on my face. And if not, then there's a problem. But thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And as always, go Bills. We will see you